Hello, everyone. Pleasure to see you all. Please confirm you can hear me before we make a start. Just write in the chat if you can hear me. Perfect. Thank you, Nimi. So before we start, please introduce yourself. Just write your name, your country, and the field that you are looking forward to. Your field. So if you're in public health nutrition, if you're in gender and development, if you're in agriculture and development, you can write that in the chat. Just your name, your country, and your field. This is the essence of networking, which Chevening really encourages, and you can start networking before you even become Cheveners. Waiting for introductions so that we can make a start. Perfect. I can see Nimi from Bangladesh is a nutritionist applying for sustainable food systems and food security. That's my area. Waiting for the others. Please introduce yourself. Just write a comment. Introduce yourself. Just write your name, your country, and the field that you're looking forward. At the same time, as you introduce yourself, I'll just be in a minute. I'll just give you how we're going to run this session. So Farhana Rahman is a public health nutritionist from Bangladesh too. Ucheni, that's from Nigeria. Biotech, applying for biotechnology. Great to see you. I can see some people who I looked at their essays, so I'm glad to see that you've been. Gerald John from Tanzania, looking forward to study MA International Relations. Great. We still have a couple of people who we are waiting for your introductions. If you're joining, we're just using 1 minute more to introduce ourselves. Just write your name on the chat and what you're looking forward to study, just to have a view of who's here and what fields are represented. So I'm going to make a start now. And first of all, I would like to tell all of you congratulations on being shortlisted for the Chevening Scholarship. It's not an easy thing. So wherever you are, you should start clapping for yourself, because this is a huge achievement, even getting to this stage. So many people apply. I know in some countries like Kenya, they get like over 10,000 applications and they only shortlist 100. So congratulations to all of you for getting to this stage. And one thing you need to remember is you wrote quality essays, you presented yourself well, and that's the reason you are shortlisted. So carry that spirit, carry that positivity to the next stage, knowing that you made it to this stage. The other thing I would like to say is that this is your last step. This is the only thing between you and Chevening Scholarship right now is the interview. So give it everything. And when I mean give it everything, I'll be telling you what to do the next steps in order for you to enhance your chances of getting the scholarship. You have a 50% chance of getting the scholarship right now. Mostly they in some countries, I know they just they just interview like 100 people when they want 40. So if your country like Nigeria, I know they get more than, because of their population quota, so probably they get more. So probably there are more people being shortlisted. So, and this is something that I really want to insist, that you need to prepare for this interview and give your best. So having said that, I'm going to give you now how are we going to run this session. Number one, we'll just be looking at how is the interview. So we'll be looking at how is the interview session, and before we go into the preparation. And then for the preparation, we'll be looking at different type of questions they ask and how you can approach those questions. Some of them are direct questions, some of them are indirect questions. But by the end of this session, I'm hoping that you'll be able to have a clear view of how you want to approach the interview. And the next few days, I know some people have the interviews next week, others have more than a whole month to prepare. So there's a lot of dynamics in there. So by the end of this session, I'm really looking forward to making sure that you know exactly what you want to do between today and when you do your interview. The next thing I would like to say is that is really, this is your moment, and Chevening can change your life. And I say that because people have different outcomes when they do the Chevening scholarship, and that means you could go to the same course or the same program with someone from your country, and both of you will end up very differently because, as you all know, it's an interaction between you and the opportunity. So some people take advantage of it fully, some people do not take advantage of it fully. So, and that matters. So, and I really want you to move from this session with some inspiration, some motivation to go to the next stage. So the first question I would like to address is, how is the interview like? So the interview is basically more of a conversation between you and the panelists. And the panelists can include someone from the British High Commission. So there's someone in charge of the Chevening program who chairs the interview panel. There's someone from your field, probably picked from the Chevening alumni in your country. I've been invited before to interview candidates. I've been outside the country most of the time, so I've not attended. So if you're in your field, someone might be in your field. Someone in your field might be in the Chevening panel. They might also have someone from the British Council. As you all know, Chevening is moving to the British Council. It's being moved from the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. So you could have someone from representing the British Council. And basically, most of the times there are like 3 people, and they ask questions in turns. And those questions, there is no order. They can start with any, whether it's a leadership question, whether it's a networking question, or studying in the UK question, or a career question. And this is general advice, again, I'm going to give you. Some questions can come in twos. So one question, but I call them one question in two. So that means you have to listen attentively, and just look at them and get the question. Take your time before you answer a question. For example, take a few seconds, internalize it. It causes no harm taking 2 seconds because you can't count when you're being interviewed. Take a breath, and once you take a breath, you've allowed yourself now to structure your answer already. So the other thing is that I'm hoping all of you have booked your interviews, so you know the exact dates, and you'll also be allowed to enter. The British High Commission, of course, is highly guarded. So you'll have to go with your identity document. They only want your identity document. So, and that means what you'll need is, for example, in my case, we would leave. I didn't have a passport by then, so we would leave our ID cards, our national identity card at the gate. But they still need to see something. So sometimes you need to photocopy your ID, but you can have that conversation via email just before your interview and know what documents you're going to carry, whether it's a passport. I think they also accept driving licenses. The other thing is that during your interview, they're very close to you. It's like a table between you and them. The panelist is just a table. So that means you need to present yourself well, and you also need to arrive early because the interviews, they're normally they're interviewing several people every day. So that means if you get late, then their whole schedule for the whole day is disrupted. The other thing, of course, I need to mention is that in this interview, what really happens is they'll ask questions about your essays, so nothing new. So, and because your essays were already read and you've been shortlisted, so there's nothing outside the ordinary what they're going to ask you. So it just basically, maybe the questions will change a little bit, but they'll be looking for the same kind of answers that you gave in your essays. So that should give you some confidence again. There's nothing new in this interview, and you need to carry that in the next stage. So if the Chevening interview is what is between you and the Chevening scholarship, then preparation becomes key. So, and how do you prepare then? First of all, there's sessions like this one, but the main thing that you'll have to when you're preparing your interview is actually a mock interview. And I want to give you a personal story. And those who follow me, probably I'll post it in a few days on social media or probably Instagram. Is that I had read so much. In fact, I had like over 100 questions, and I'm sure some of you were in the Facebook group where those questions have been shared because I've seen them in one of the files. Is that I had read so much and I had read my essays, and until I did a mock interview, I realized I wasn't ready. And I told the lady who was doing the mock interview with me, can we reschedule this because I don't think I'm ready at all. It's one thing to read. It's one thing to read your essays. It's one thing to know the questions they ask. It's another thing, someone looking at you and asking you, tell us about yourself. Although I'll come back to that and tell you that question is not really graded. It's just a question for introductions. So the best way to prepare for the Chevening interview is mock interviews. And the more you do, the better. For example, people have mocked over the years since 2019 when I got the scholarship. Did I even introduce myself? My name is Sam. Of course, we've interacted with you many times through this channel. I'm a PhD student studying the intersection of food systems and public health, basically looking at childhood obesity and food environments in South London. So, and I'm in my second year. And so, what I was saying is that when you're preparing for this interview, you realize that it's one thing to read so much, it's one thing to know these things. It's another thing when someone asks you those questions and tell us of a time when you demonstrated leadership. So the best cushion you can have for this is mock interviews, and the more you do, the better. Why? My approach might be different. So when you use different people and they have different formats of asking you these questions and the different feedback you get, then that means you're able to select what feedback then you're going to incorporate in your answers. So that's how the interview preparation I'm going to say on that. And the other thing is practice by yourself. Use a mirror, listen to your voice, ask yourself, man, in fact, when I was preparing for my interview, I typed the answers. Like I would type, tell us about yourself. When they ask me on introduction, I'm going to say this. And I would revise it and revise it until I felt like this is a perfect answer. The other thing I would say is that when it comes to these questions, it's normally there's no standard Chevening interview. Some people have had interviews of like 20 minutes, others have had 40 minutes, others have had like 1 hour plus, and all of them have ended up getting the scholarship. So what I would advise is don't take more than 2 to 3 minutes for every question. So and this, what will help you in this is the format. And I'm going into details in this later and explain to you why sticking to the STAR approach, especially on leadership questions, is important, because it means you only present the relevant facts. And I say relevant facts in capital letters because you're not just going to give a story. Sometimes we ask questions and we give so much background information that is not even helpful. So for every sentence you say, for every word you say, ask yourself, is this adding value to my answer? And that's the reason why thinking through the different types of questions, because we forget, it's always good to write them. Say, if I am asked, tell us of a time when you solved a conflict, or when you had a team and there was conflict, you need, again, your mind to bring back and say, this is a leadership question. I need to use this approach. So I need to describe a situation and time when there was a conflict in the team I was working with. First of all, take one sentence or two to describe the conflict. So you've given the background information in 1 or 2 sentences, and then you've gone back to say what the context was and what was required to be done, and probably how that was going to affect your team if it wasn't going to be solved. And then you give a list of actions of what you did step by step. First of all, I got in to know the details of the conflict. Maybe you could give details of how you approached every party separately. because of avoiding bringing people together. Sometimes that's not the best way. The best way probably listen to one separately, listen to the other group separately, or different multiple groups separately, and then bring them together, and then you understand the issue, and then you offer you how it now that helped. Probably give whether that solved the conflict and how your team changed and probably you're able to achieve your objectives. So I'm just giving an example of how you need to have that ability when you prepare for an interview. It doesn't matter whether the question is asked directly or indirectly, you're able to know exactly what they're looking for. So just to mention, if you have any question, please write them down. I'll be taking your questions after this session, and I'm sure we'll be able to answer them. So write them down. Don't put them in the chat yet. I'll tell you when to put them in the chat, because when you put them very early, I might not see them. So the other thing I've said, you use mock interviews, read a lot, and also practice using a mirror, listen to your voice. You can even tell some people have even used people who have never gotten the Chevening scholarship. So it doesn't have to be the alumni. You could maybe give someone questions. Tell them, can you ask me a sample questions here, like two here, two from this section on leadership, two from this section on networking, two from career, and then see how it goes. So because what we are testing is not only the content, but also the delivery, and also the confidence that you have in whatever you're saying. And someone will tell you, by the way, when you speak, probably you are not looking at me. We're not, you need eye contact is important, of course. Or probably when you speak, you're not loud enough. Or probably when you speak, you're not convincing. So, or maybe you're overusing your hands, or probably you're not even using your hands when you're answering your questions, because it's a lot complicated when you're communicating rather than just the content, as much as the content is important. That's the general part of it. So I want to go to the first questions they might ask you, and that's generally the leadership questions. So when it comes to leadership, it's for me, I think it's not the hardest, but there are multiple ways of asking this question. They can ask you, tell us of a time when you failed. So tell us a time when you solved a conflict, or tell us a time when what. So what I'm trying to say is that the questions can be direct. And a direct question is always like, tell us a time when you demonstrated leadership. So indirect questions could be about conflict resolution, could be about tell us your biggest achievement, or tell us your weakness. So I'm not going to delve very deeply into what you need to say in this, but when you ask a question when you demonstrated leadership, please stick to the STAR approach, because you'll stick to the relevant facts. So you need to go straight. In 2022, while working as a program officer for organization X, you need to be very specific. Then you'll say there was this problem of maybe 1, 2, 3. You've given the problem, and then you keep going and say how the problem was affecting the organization. I keep saying that sentence is always important. Don't just say there was a problem. Just say the problem, how the problem exactly was affecting the organization. So, for example, if there's a community problem, and I keep using this again, if there was an issue of, let's say, low performance in schools in your community, and you want to use as an example of how you demonstrate leadership, then the next sentence would say how that affects the community. So you'd say when kids don't go to school, when there are so many dropouts, then that means their future is ruined, and you might have people with unfavorable outcomes in the community, and mostly that also leads to undesirable social behavior, including crime. So that sentence is always important to give context rather than just saying there was a problem. You've also given how the problem is affecting the community. And then the most important part, the meat of the answer. Sorry for those who don't eat meat. I'm using this example. The meat of the answer is always now actions, because you might be able to describe a problem so well, but until you describe what exactly you did and use step-by-step process. So first of all, I went to the chief and I requested a meeting, maybe to speak in one of the community gatherings. And I mean, chief could be anything, the community leaders when there's a meeting, or you wanted to come up with a mentorship program to mentor kids in your local secondary or primary school. So first of all, you went to the principal of the school and you requested permission to have a session with the students. So then you give a step, and then think of the fleshing out it in a way that, if, for example, you had to convince them, then explain how you convince them. First of all, you explain to them the problem. The reason why I'm saying this is because one of the things you'll note, and if you forget everything today, just remember this, that here, you're not trying to tell someone you're a leader, you are showing you're a leader. So how do you show? When you're trying to say, oh, by the way, the principal was not convinced, so I had to use my influence skills. So remember, the question is on leadership and influence. So for example, when you're able to influence people to see problem like the way you have seen it, and to agree with you and to give you a chance, already there's a tick somewhere among the panelists. This is a leader. They've convinced someone up there that this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Then remember, when giving your actions, please don't just give one thing you did. Give it step by step. For example, think through of all the things you did. Whether, say, you started with 3 people, how you got more people. Could it be, for example, you used flyers, you used social media? Be specific. I created a Google form, posted it on Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups. I also looked for alumni who went to the same school with. When I reached them out of 10, 7 replied. Those details, actually, you have a success rate of 70%. So we are not saying you say you have a success rate of 70%. Remember, you're telling us a story. So here, it's you telling us a story, and then for us, we are left to conclude you're a leader. So don't say you're a leader. Tell us the things you've done so that someone can conclude this is a leader. You're showing, you're not telling. And that's basically what I mean. Questions on achievements, focus on the process again. Or when someone asks you about the process, about your biggest achievement, focus on the things you did in order to get to that achievement. I would go for probably something I've done for the community and I felt so proud of myself. So I would never go for like, oh, getting a master's degree or getting a first class is my biggest achievement. No, 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 no. I would go for something that's community related. So you remove yourself from the picture and see the community out there and something that you've solved in the community or been part of the group, and then you use that as an example. Another thing to use is to say is not all leadership examples where you'll have done things by yourself. You might be in a group, and most of the things we do actually in a group. So what really is important there to note is, please, 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 always focus on your contributions to the group. Yes, you might have been a group doing mentorship, but your role was outreach. So you're the one who are producing posters, you're the one who was making announcements in local churches. So focus on direct actions that contributed to the event or to the group. So don't say we, you're using yourself. Remember, we are looking at leadership from a personal level. Questions on weaknesses, and these are common these days in interview questions. So be very, very, very truthful in your answers. So we all have weaknesses. Not everything we've done has worked. And you need to give it like, yes, this failed. The only thing, and this is a twist that comes very important, at the end of it, twist it and show the action, the lessons you learned from something that failed or your biggest failure or weakness. What the lessons you learned from it, and probably if you had a chance of doing a similar event in the future, say you applied the lessons and that one succeeded. So don't try and twist the weakness question in a way that someone will say, oh, this guy doesn't have weakness. We all have weaknesses. We all have failed somewhere. So, and that's the reason why you need to be very, very truthful in it, but then twist it at the end and show that there are lessons you learned from the whole thing that failed. And then from there, say how you did something afterwards that actually worked after applying those lessons. The other question I'm going to go to is the networking question. And it can be a very direct question and can come in twos, tell us of how you've networked before and how you're going to apply those skills to network in the UK. So remember, those are 2 questions. And if you don't concentrate in your interview, you'll answer one bit. And then you realize, oh, I actually didn't answer the other bits. So always take your time and internalize the question. So basically in this question, they're looking for someone who has the skills to initiate professional relationships that end up benefiting that person. So ideally, again, for you, for those who've walked the journey together, for networking essay, most of the corrections I've done is people who say things how they've networked, but they end up saying how the community benefited. What Chevening is looking is someone who can take advantage, if to use such a word, or leverage on the opportunity to grow themselves. So, what skills do you have in terms of networking? So, I would go for you need to give your example in a way that you describe a situation where you've networked successfully. For example, I know there are people who, for example, if I were to use an engineer, they attend conferences. Maybe they are part of the engineering board of their country. So probably they've attended a meeting and then they were able to network. So you'll start the question as, in 2022, while working as an engineer at X, I attended the annual engineering board of country X annual meeting. In this meeting, I was impressed by one of the speakers who was speaking of something I'm passionate about. Just say what that is. Don't say something you're passionate about. Give it a name. Is it civil, whatever, or the new way of constructing roads, or something, or whatever it is, and then say how you approached them. Always remember, you initiated the relationship. So you are the one who approaches, not them approaching you. And then you had a conversation, and the conversation led to you exchanging contacts. And later, probably they saw you're passionate about something. And when they had an opening in their company, or they saw an opening somewhere else, they made you know about that opportunity, and you applied, you interviewed, and you got it. Ideally, that's the end of a networking example, the point where you benefit. Remember, you've shown you can actually approach someone. So those are the skills they're looking for. So Chevening is thinking, or the panelists are thinking, that when you come to the UK, you'll be able to use the same skills to approach, meet people in your profession, be it your lecturers, be it for conferences that you'll attend, be it achievements from other countries in your field, be it the secretariat, because they also have professionals and they have also opportunities. For those in media, there's always that opportunity to do an internship with the BBC. So they know that you can leverage on such opportunities to network, and that networking can lead to growth in your career. So in that angle, then you need to think in your field, the career plan you've written, who do you need to network with in order to achieve your career plan? In fact, that's how the question was phrased in my interview. And I've never forgotten it in 2019. They asked me, yes, they asked me questions about career plan. And then afterwards, they're like, yes, who do you need to network with in order to achieve this? So it brings you to the point now you have to contextualize your answer. I've written, I want to become the Minister of Health in my country, and I want to address the issue of nutrition, probably because of the health outcomes. And I want to improve how people eat. Then you're like, for you to become the Minister of Health in your country, who do you need to network with? So you might have to think of who makes the decision. Can you hear me now? Let me know whether you can hear me now. Perfect. If you can hear me, that's all right. Then we can proceed. Perfect. Thank you very much. So if you want to something like elections in your country, then you might need to know the community leaders or the